Good evening, HPAT audience, and we are happy you're joining us this afternoon. We are here for the State Legislative District 7A Forum this evening. We have our two candidates with us, Lori Janatopoulos and Cal Warwis, and they're both going to give a brief introduction of themselves, telling us something about their background, why they're interested in the office, and then we have a whole slurry of questions here, and to put the minds of both candidates at rest. No, we're not going to keep you here until 10 o'clock and ask all 36 questions, but that thought did come to mind earlier. So, Lori, would you like to start? And then when we get to closing, we'll have Cal do his first.
Sure, sounds good. Thank you. So my name is Lori Janatopoulos, and I am thrilled to be running to represent the Iron Range in District 7B in the State House. Thank you to the organizers for this forum. Thank you to the audience and all those who are listening. As I said, I'm thrilled to be running. I'm excited to discuss my passion for the Iron Range. As I've said before, I love the Iron Range. I love Iron Rangers and our determination and our willingness to work together when times are tough. In my answers today, I want you to know a little bit about me. I want you to see how I prioritize important decisions that we have ahead of us, and I'm excited to tell you a bit about my platform. The theme of my campaign is Iron Range Strong, and what that means is an Iron Range strong economy built on mining, including copper nickel mining, and Iron Range strong families, including public education, so public dollars for public schools, and Iron Range strong communities, which means strong infrastructure and protecting our outdoor lifestyle. Rangers expect their representative to deliver on mainstream bread and butter issues, just as Representative Liz Lagarde did, and that's what I plan to do. Across the district, I have heard from voters and their concerns about extreme issues that polarize us and the political rhetoric that stretches the truth. I believe in transparency, truth, and accessibility, and my job will be serving the people of District 7B, and I will be your full-time legislator, and you will be my full-time work. And so I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Cal?
Well, good evening, everyone. I am Cal Warwis. As most of you probably know, I am running for State House 7B as well. And I've been in this race since October 28th of last year. And I just want to thank Steve Potts. I wish Pastor Dan was here so I could thank him as well. I was looking forward to seeing him as well. And I'd like to thank the audience and the Hibbing Public Access Television for their good work on this. I am in this race to restore balance to Minnesota state government. What we've seen in the last 2 years has been absolutely horrifying, with 49% approximately of our citizens, mostly rural Minnesota, being overlooked in the legislative process. And we've seen votes being taken on party lines only, with the minority party completely shut out of lawmaking with rarely any amendments. The only place that Republicans can expect to get any opportunity to contribute to the lawmaking process is during bonding. So I am running to restore balance to Minnesota state government, to bring a Republican majority to the House of Representatives so that we can prioritize what affects Rangers. And that would be sustaining and expanding mining, affordable energy policy, supporting our police and our Second Amendment, and also protecting minor children from harm. We've seen some very dangerous things for kids as it pertains to the gender affirming care bill that was passed, also on a party line vote. And this is child abuse, and we need to end that in Minnesota, like many other states have done as well. So I'm running for those things. I am proud to be supported by the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association and also the NRA.
Thank you. Let me put this question to Lori first, and what we're going to do, what we usually do in the forums, is shift back and forth in terms of order of questions. Lori, what are the top 3 issues facing Minnesota during the next biennium, and how would you deal with each one of these? This is question 9, and I will tell you which question is on your list, so if you've taken notes on this, it'll make it easier for you to refer to.
Sure. So the top 3 issues facing Minnesota during the next biennium, and how would you deal with each? Well, I think one is fiscal responsibility, and I think that we have to fight to make sure that we balance the budget. I also think that making sure that our tax money is spent efficiently and wisely on education and safety and health and families, and that our key jobs and economic drivers, mining, tourism, logging, are kept strong. And third, I would fight to lower property taxes. I think property taxes are a very regressive form of taxation. For the district itself, I think economic development with copper nickel mining and reforming permitting processes would be a key priority of mine. I think workforce supports, I have a lot of experience in developing workforce, across many years, both at Arrowhead Economic Opportunity Agency, as well as with the state of Minnesota as the Career Force Director. And I'm extremely proud to have 21 union endorsements as well, because I support working families. And I think workforce development and workforce support is definitely going to be a key issue for the district and probably statewide as well, given that we've experienced a very tight labor market in Minnesota. And I think we have to promote fair economic treatment for our region. We have to ensure that our taconite tax dollars stay on the core Iron Range where they're produced.
Thank you. Cal, the same question. What are the top 3 issues facing Minnesota during the next biennium, and how would you deal with each of these?
So those 3 in my order are that we've had no forward motion for Minnesota mining and manufacturing. We've been completely status quo, and we've been trying to expand those projects out, and that has not been happening. Secondly, we have out-of-control energy costs. We're very concerned about how industries, and especially residents and seniors on a fixed income, are going to be able to pay their energy bills. And then finally, crime and attacks on our Second Amendment. So firstly, as I've said many times, permitting reform for all industries is critical, and I will champion that reform. It needs to be timely and predictable so people can have a reasonable expectation that we're actually going to be able to move forward with these projects. And that's something that's not happened, and we've had decades to accomplish this. Secondly, we need to have an all-of-the-above approach to energy production, which includes lifting the moratorium on nuclear power in Minnesota. We can't have anybody coming in to invest in our power situation when it's essentially banned from the state, effectively banned. So we need an all-of-the-above approach for energy. One of the reasons I say that is because foundry work right here in Hibbing, Minnesota, 90 steelworker jobs were lost because of the high cost of energy this past April. My brothers and sisters in that industry will never have those jobs again. I had an uncle that worked in that industry for about 40 years. So energy is very close to my heart, and reforming that. As I've said before, supporting our law enforcement officers by standing behind them and enforcing the laws we have on the books, along with mandatory minimum sentences for violent crimes, would be a great start. Citizens should feel safe in their own homes, and criminals should not.
Thank you. Cal, this one first, question number 3. Immigration is a concern for Minnesota voters. What should the legislatures... Sorry, I forgot rebuttals.
Oh.
Lori?
Sure. So I support law enforcement as well, and I think law enforcement definitely needs the tools that they need to enforce the laws that we have, and the criminal justice system should also work in favor of the citizens and not in favor of the criminals. And so I'm a big supporter of law enforcement. I have to take issue with the fact, though, that crime is rising, when in fact crime is not rising. Crime has declined. In fact, actually, it declined 6.9% in 2023 and 8.6% in 2022. St. Louis County's violent crime rate is less than half that of the nation as a whole. And so I don't think fear-mongering about crime is a good idea. I think actually talking with police and the departments about what they need and how we can better help them address issues is is the way to handle that. With regard to energy, the only thing I'll say is that I think that most people understand that the climate is changing and that we need to transition to a clean economy,
Thank you.
energy economy.
Cal, rebuttal?
Absolutely, yeah, I'm glad Lori mentioned talking to law enforcement about the issues that are actually out on the streets. This past week, I had the pleasure of spending an entire afternoon and evening with the St. Louis County Sheriff's Department on a ride-along, and then I transferred over to the Virginia Police Department to complete the evening. And I spent time with the undersheriff talking about what's happening in law enforcement and how difficult it is to find cops to fill these roles. And what I'm finding out from him and others is that they feel demoralized because they're effectively doing their jobs. They're arresting criminals, no matter how low the crime rates could sound like they are. They're arresting these criminals and they go to court, and then the judges in turn turn them loose on the streets again. The courts are backed up. We need mandatory minimum sentencing for violent crimes to make sure that these criminals aren't returning to the streets over and over. And yeah, I'll just end with that.
Thank you. Cal, let's question you first, number 3. Immigration is a concern for Minnesota voters. What should the legislature's position be when it comes to this issue?
So first of all, the legislature failed all Minnesotans when on a party line vote in 2023, they passed a bill to give illegal aliens driver's licenses. This is surely a mechanism to attract more of the same. Secondly, an egregious move made by the House and Senate, again on strict party line votes by Democrats, is that they were dead set on being sure that the driver's license issued cannot look any different than that of a citizen like myself, or even my opponent here. This is a huge slap in the face to legal immigrants everywhere in this country. And across the country, as they worked hard for what they have to access citizenship. And these illegal aliens are coming here, and sure, they're working hard, but they're getting driver's licenses, and that's a magnet for more of the same.
Thank you. Lori, the same question. Immigration is a concern for Minnesota voters. What should the legislature's position be when it comes to this issue?
Well, first I want to make sure that folks know that immigration is a national issue and that we really need DC to work on it and in an orderly, bipartisan fashion. And there was a bill that was up in front of the Congress that had bipartisan support that would have actually helped with the border issues that then became a political football and did not pass. And so it is a national issue. We have to work with the national government. I'm hoping that our representatives like Congressman Stauber and others will work on this issue in a bipartisan fashion to secure our border. Secondly, I agree with Cal about hardworking immigrants. I think that's true. We need a path for people to be able to come here. I don't favor people coming here illegally. I think that the border needs to be tighter. I think that's true. And with regard to the driver's licenses for all bill, that bill was passed with support of law enforcement agencies statewide. And so law enforcement, who we both say that we support, was in support of that bill. And I believe the Chamber of Commerce was in support as well.
Thank you. Cal, chance for rebuttal first.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have a path for legal immigration, and that's being run over roughshod. Most alarming, back to the driver's licenses, is that these new drivers will have an automatic and legitimate source of ID that they could use when registering to do same-day voting during election time. When the DFL passed the law for these licenses, they actually stated, ironically, that these folks would never do that because it's illegal. I hope everyone can see why this is a huge issue and should be we should have a massive revision in how or if these licenses are issued at all.
Thank you. Lori?
Well, I'm just wondering if my opponent then disagrees with the law enforcement agencies that supported driver's licenses for all. That's one question that I have. The second is that it's not a question, but it's a statement about why we do need to make sure that we have adequate pathways to citizenship that really work, and bipartisan support of this. Because as Career Force Director for the state of Minnesota, during, as I already mentioned, a very, very tight labor market, we need workers, and we need workers in northern Minnesota as well and on the Iron Range. And if we cannot gain the workers from the people we have, we do need people to come here to help in the jobs that we have available.
Thank you. Lori, this question to you first. Question number 5, what should incentives be offered to attract economic development to the district? And if so, what should these incentives be?
Well, absolutely. I think incentives should be offered to attract economic development to the district. You know, the truth is we are competing not only statewide now, we're competing globally, and we have to have those opportunities and those incentives in order to attract those businesses. We're lucky to have the Iron Range Resources and Rehabilitation Agency here, which can work to give us a leg up in attracting those industries through business loans and grants and other sorts of things, those incentives that support workforce, especially good union jobs. Again, very, very pleased to be trusted by many unions across the district who have endorsed my campaign. We also need to talk to the businesses that are coming in to find out what their needs are, or that would come in, to find out what their needs are for incentives. And we need strong public education systems. We need a strong workforce. We need to make sure that our taconite tax dollars are used to support those efforts as well. And so those are the kinds of things that we can do to make sure we attract economic development here and businesses here. And we have to grow our own as well. We have to make sure that our citizens who are here have access to funding to develop businesses too.
Thank you. Al, the same question. Should incentives be offered to attract economic development to the district? And if so, what should these incentives be?
Yes, absolutely. We've long had some kind of incentives for businesses to locate here, but before we can really talk about what more we can do, we should really be reminded that the Minnesota legislature continues to disincentivize locating manufacturers and others from coming here because of the high tax burden. And manufacturing really pays the bills. Also, we have a unique ability. I agree with Lori, we have a unique ability with the Iron Range Resources and Rehabilitation Agency to offer incentives for new businesses. But as I've been consistently pointing out, to fund the IRRB, we need new mining to sustain that resource and to sustain the IRRR. They do great work over there. I've been the beneficiary of some of that work. I've got a broadband project in my township that's coming to fruition because of the work I've been able to do with the IRRR from the township board level, also working with DEED in St. Louis County and CTC. So no new mining equals even less other economic activity because we use the IRRR to help get projects across the finish line all across the range. Whenever someone needs funding, they say, well, have you talked to the IRRR? Well, there won't be an IRRR to talk to if we don't sustain and promote new mining projects.
Thank you. Lori, rebuttal?
Yep, and as I've said, we need our taconite tax dollars to stay here in the core Iron Range. And I know that some Republicans certainly do not support that. And so if we want to continue to have an IRRR, to have IRRR dollars invested in the place where those dollars were created through mining, we need to protect our area and those taconite taxes. And I hope my opponent would agree with me on that. I also support funding for the NRRI and for the research that they can do into technology and other avenues to make sure that we are an attractive place for businesses to operate. And so I support those efforts as well.
Thank you. Cal, rebuttal?
That I would want the money from the IRRB to go anywhere else is an absolute slap in the face to me as a lifelong Iron Ranger, and especially since I'm a third-generation miner and a second-generation steelworker. The prospect of sending our money outside of the taconite relief area is absurd. We have five Republicans sitting on the IRRR board right now, and I'm ready to join them in January.
Thank you. Cal, I'll ask you this question first. Question number one. I think I already know your answer, but I'll ask anyway. For our audience, do you support proposed copper nickel mining projects in Northeast Minnesota? And how would you advocate for or against them?
So I will emphatically, yes, the answer is yes. I will advocate for copper, nickel mining, and platinum group metal mining, the same as I have done for the last 8 years as a citizen pro-mining activist. As you know, I'm a miner and a pro-mining advocate, and without mining, we cease to function as an economy. And without mining, we will lose our population base and also lose representation, and thereby carrying less weight with each vote in St. Paul as the state continues to become more metrocentric. In the last 8 years, I've maintained a very high profile as an activist for the cause of expanding our mining and precious metals. I'm a member of Fight for Mining Minnesota, with whom I've traveled to Washington, D.C. to petition lawmakers to give our mineral leases back for the Twin Metals project in Ely, which is something we need to see happen, not just in our lifetime, but soon. I'm also a member of Better in Our Backyard, Mining Minnesota, and the Iron Mining Association. And as a citizen mining activist, I've been writing about the need for new mining and affordable energy for the last 8 years. You can go online and find it anywhere. You can find it on social media. You can find it in the Mesabi Tribune. We need permit reform to start our projects after a set number of review years, and I'll move to pastoral reform so we can basically escape baseless and endless lawsuits and move forward as an economy on the Iron Range.
Thank you. Lori, the same question. Do you support proposed copper nickel mining projects in northeastern Minnesota? And how would you advocate for or against them?
Yes, I do absolutely support copper nickel mining projects in northeastern Minnesota. And I have had the opportunity to tour both Twin Metals and New Range copper nickel. And I was very impressed and with New Range copper nickel, how they have talked about they will be able to meet all permitting requirements that the state has. I think that's great, including the sulfate standard. And so I think that goes a long way in refuting any arguments that they won't meet requirements that we have. The permitting process does need to be shorter. I'm very pleased that Representative Liz Lagarde and Senator Housechild have recently moved to make that permitting process more, to make it happen more quickly. That first time in 14 years, although it's been talked about for a very long time. I think we need to mine these metals because we need to move to a clean energy economy. That I do not believe that climate change is a hoax. These metals are absolutely necessary in order to make that transition. And so I fully support it, and I believe that I can talk with people who might not support it now and explain to them the need to do this and hopefully gain confidence in it kind of across the aisle, making the tent bigger, if you will.
Thank you. Lori, this question to you first, number 6. Ensuring women's reproductive rights is an issue states now need to address. What should the legislature do to ensure such rights are protected? What legislation related to such issues as late-term abortions should the legislature pass?
Yep. I think this is an issue that, almost best highlights the differences between me and Cal. I absolutely believe in reproductive health care, including abortion for women, that it needs to be safe and effective. I do not believe that governments and politicians should dictate what decisions a woman should make, or how she should access health care. What worries me are states that have passed legislation now that virtually outlaws abortion, and that women either have to travel to another state or that they are dying of sepsis and other conditions. With regard to, I think that the Minnesota legislature did a good thing in the change in the reproductive health care legislation that they did last year. In the past, and I know that there's a lot of talk about third trimester abortions, and the discussion around whether or not a baby is left to die is absolutely false. No babies are left to die. In the last 15 years in Minnesota, there have been 6 abortions past a gestational age of 30 weeks. And there are 2 reasons that a late-term abortion or a third trimester abortion is done. One is for the life of the mother, and that baby is taken into a NICU. The second is if the fetus has a condition that is incompatible with life. And so when that child is born, that child is given hospice care or palliative care. The mother is able to hold that child in her arms, and the child can die peacefully rather than the doctor having to perform life-saving measures on an infant that is going to die.
Thank you. Cal, the same question. Ensuring women's reproductive rights is an issue states now need to address. What should the legislature do to ensure such rights are protected? And what legislation related to such issues as late-term abortion should the legislature pass?
Sure. I just got to mention something real quick. I thought it was hilarious when Lori mentioned politicians and she looked at me. I'm a 28-year minor, and if you Google me right now, you'll find out that I, in fact, am a politician. That's what I get credit for. When you run for State House, suddenly you're a politician. I'm twice elected to my town board, but that's who I am, apparently. On this question, I'm just going to back up a couple of years because KTS, well, first of all, the Iron Range is a very pro-life place, and I'm proud to be the only pro-life candidate in this race. I really am. And ensuring, or rather, KSTP and Star Tribune, it was, I believe, did a survey about 2 years ago, and in the response, 71% of the respondents felt that there should be at least some restrictions on abortion. And in Minnesota, we've gone beyond any other state in most countries. But I'm the only pro-life candidate in this race, and I'm proud to be so.
Thank you. Lori, rebuttal?
Sure. I looked at you, Cal, in a spirit of camaraderie. So,
A couple of politicians up here.
Yeah. But I don't think politician is a bad word, actually. I'll just make this quick because I know it's eating into my time here. But I think politicians should be honorable. I think serving in government, I think government should be of the people, by the people, and for the people. And I think it's time to bring back that kind of feeling for people that are elected representatives for us. So with regard to no restrictions, that's simply not true. Minnesota, in the laws that were changed, took out some of the restrictions that had already been overturned in courts. But there are still, as I said, there is still the ability to, save a child who is born, to save the life of the mother. And so restrictions have not been taken away, as has been suggested.
Thank you. Cal, rebuttal?
When we're saying we're going to be a government of the people and by the people and for the people, those people the Constitution is talking about, in my mind, are also the unborn. The Minnesota legislature, the actions they took in the days that followed Roe versus Wade were way beyond the expectations of everyday people. And I guarantee that most Minnesotans are not pleased with the general direction that the state has gone in this issue.
Thank you. Cal, let's question you first. Question number 12 on your list. Gun violence has reached epidemic proportions across the United States. How can the legislature protect Second Amendment rights while reducing levels of gun violence?
Well, first of all, we need to enforce the laws on the books. And we have laws dealing with these things. But when you have a revolving door in the court system, the police are out there doing their jobs, and the criminals come in, criminals go out. We need mandatory minimum sentencing for violent crime. And ending the revolving door in the courtroom. Furthermore, citizens need to be assured that the legislature and also the courts will back them up when they need to protect themselves when utilizing their Second Amendment rights. I am the only candidate in this race that has been publicly vocal about our Second Amendment rights, and I didn't need to run for public office for that to be a feature of my concern for our state and nation.
Thank you. Lori, the same question. Gun violence has reached epidemic proportions across the United States. How can the legislature protect Second Amendment rights while reducing levels of gun violence?
Yeah, I just want to say that I am a gun owner, and I do believe in Second Amendment rights. I remember taking NRA classes when I was 12 years old, and thought how good they were, and very excited to get my first 22 when I was about the same age. And so I am a proponent of Second Amendment rights, even though there have been quite a number of flyers suggesting that I don't support that by, I think, supporters of my opponent, and suggesting that I don't support mining. But I do. But a lot of gun violence is actually related to suicides. When we look at how gun violence is increasing. And so what we really need to do is we really need to spend more money in, or more resources in mental health. I have heard so much about the lack of mental health resources that we have on the range, and it's not only here, it's also across rural Minnesota, that we really, we need to work at helping people that need our help so that that kind of gun violence, we can stem that. And it will also help in talking with police officers. They have also suggested that they need help in terms of people who have either drug addictions or mental health issues.
Thank you. Cal, rebuttal?
Yeah, I'll just mention, when I was spending time with the sheriff the other day, he was also talking about how our prisons are essentially being used as a mental health stopover. And it's very, very concerning. This is something that we have agreement on. And that's a huge problem. We definitely need to be investing in our mental health facilities and getting people out of the prisons where violent criminals need to go and get them some real help. As far as the independent expenditures that have been spent, apparently on my behalf, but attacking Lori and things like that, I find a lot of those disgusting, by the way. I just want you to know that. It's illegal for me to have any part or any contact with these third-party groups that mailed these things out. And so just for the audience, I want you to know that obviously we've tried to keep a very positive campaign going, and we would not be mailing out anything like what you've seen. And I'm actually ashamed of some of the things I've seen out there. It's politics, it's nasty, but it's not coming from my campaign. As far as the Second Amendment is concerned, with me as your representative, your rights shall not be infringed.
Thank you. Lori, I'm going to ask you this question first. The legislature's last session is number 29. The legislature's last session committed the state to enormous expenditures that may be difficult to sustain. What should be the legislature's financial priorities in its next session?
Yes, and so in the last session, I'm unsure. The premise of the question, I think, is a little misleading. There were a lot of one-time pandemic federal dollars that came in that had to be spent. And so that was part of the budget surplus that was spent. I also want to point out that I wasn't in the legislature at the time, neither was Cal, and so I'm not exactly sure, what the discussions were and how the votes came down with what was spent. However, there are definitely some things that I am in favor of. I think that the child tax credits was a good idea. I think the reform that was done for Social Security tax was a good idea. I think that increasing local government aid was a good idea. I think the money that was put into infrastructure was a good idea. And I think the money that was put into broadband was also a good idea.
Okay, thank you. Cal, same question. The legislature's last session committed the state to enormous expenditures that may be difficult to sustain. What should be the legislature's financial priorities in its next session?
So I missed the number of the question.
29, pardon me.
29. Thank you. That's a lot of questions, man.
We agree.
So the legislature's, okay, so getting back, I feel that we need to get back to the fundamentals of good government, okay? Education, safe transportation, public safety. We need to take care of those most vulnerable, and that means senior citizens and those in home health care situations as well. Record inflation has been hurting our entire population. And I'm at the stage of life where, you know, with this inflation that we're facing, right now I have a good job. I can work overtime, I can work a side job. That benefits me. I can fight inflation by working more. But senior citizens don't have that opportunity. They're on a fixed income and they're struggling. And the generation that came before us paved the way for our future, and I think we need to honor those efforts.
Thank you. Lori, any rebuttal or additions?
I would only say that the legislature has limited opportunity to affect inflation, but that we should look at where we can, like lowering drug prices and making healthcare more affordable and accessible, you know, those sorts of areas to tackle.
Okay, thank you. Cal?
So in regard to that, so we can't have the legislature in the state actually change inflationary rates, right? Those pressures. But what we can do is help lower the cost of energy, and that will ensure that other costs will also start to trend down. The cost of heating and air conditioning, transportation, taxes on fuel, all these affect the cost of food as well. And we need to commit to doing better for the benefit of all Minnesota citizens.
Thank you. Cal, this question to you first, number 28. The state legislature has suffered from gridlock and a lack of civility. What do you see as the best way to return the legislature to a more productive atmosphere? I guess we could ask this for U.S. Congress too, but.
That's absolutely true. I think they should treat each other and every person that they interact with as a constituent. As an elected official myself, I always work to see the other side of an issue. And when I'm talking to a constituent, I'm always going to be treating them as best as I possibly can. I don't need to agree with someone to take time to be kind. And I hope more people can espouse the same kind of attitude, especially in the legislature.
Thank you. Lori, the same question. The state legislature has suffered from gridlock and a lack of civility. What do you see as the best way to return the legislature to a more productive atmosphere?
Right. I think we need to do that. I know that Senator Hauschild is chair, I believe, of the Civility Caucus in the Minnesota legislature. I would like to be part of that caucus as well. I think it's extremely important. Throughout my entire career, I have tried to be a bridge builder because there are people that I might fundamentally disagree with that I will work with, that I need to work with. We need to cross the aisle to get solutions to the problems that we face. And even if someone has some fundamental differences of opinion, there's always something that we can work together on. And that has been my philosophy in life. I have been a bridge builder. I will continue to do that. I know it's hard for one person to change a system, but it has to start with one person. As a small example of being a bridge builder, my ex-husband has my sign in his yard, and so that's just, what more than that can I say?
Thank you. Cal, rebuttal?
That's a really great line, but I don't have an ex-husband. So, Yeah, another thing to bear in mind when you're paid to do a job, I talk about this with my kids. You know, when you're paid to do a job and you have coworkers, you're paid to get along. And even if we don't always agree, you go to work, you respect your coworkers, and when you go home at the end of the day, well, you might talk about, gee, that really wasn't the greatest thing, but you're paid to get along, you follow through, you do the work that people sent you to do. And even if we're not always friends, we can be civil to each other, absolutely.
Yeah, you know, I think we have a couple weeks before the election. We could work on getting you that lawn sign. Lori, a rebuttal?
Just that it is vitally important. I mean, we have to change. We can't stay in our own little, bubbles, in our own little echo chambers. We have to break out and we have to work together. People, I've heard this time and again across the district with people that I've talked with, that they're tired of the gridlock, and we need elected officials that are going to care more about governing than they are about their next election.
Thank you. Lori, this question to you first, number 13 on the list. Increased funding for public education is a continuing topic for discussion. How would you act to improve K-12 educational quality and to ensure fair and adequate spending for schools?
First of all, I'd like to say that I'm very proud to have Education Minnesota's endorsement in this race. One of the stories that I heard in their screening process was about the inequities that our schools experience. There are schools in the metro suburbs that are more property rich than we are, that have opportunities for their students to attend Model UN. And we, of course, struggle to have students attend, or able to have some, extracurricular activities and such. And so that kind of disparity we need to equalize. And so I would advocate for a rural disparity tier within the equalization formula to direct more state funding towards our rural schools, like on the Iron Range. I'd work on the issue with Senator Housechild, highlighting to look at seasonal recreational property taxation from folks that, might live in the cities. I want to help our schools get the resources they need for capital improvements, and so we can look at doing that. And also special education funding, evidently, that the federal government is supposed to pay to the states has been, dismally put forward. And so I think we need to work with our federal officials on that as well.
Thank you. Al, same question, number 13. Increased funding for public education is a continuing topic for discussion. How would you act to improve K-12 educational quality and ensure fair and adequate spending for schools?
Well, I think to improve education, we need to lean into our independent school districts. We have a lot of top-down type management happening in state government, and we have locally elected officials for a reason. It is an independent school district after all. This is why we work so hard to elect good leaders, is so that they can spend the money wisely that we get out to these schools for their own success. And it's meaningful to talk about what we do as a state, but the decisions that hit home, the closest are those made by elected officials, and you can reach out and easily make contact with. And I mean like school board actually, and things like that. There were over 60 mandates that affected how the funding that was allocated to schools that were rolled out and actually ended up hurting schools. We saw historic funding. Everybody talked about fully funding schools, which I believe in funding schools, obviously. Every child deserves a good education. But when we have these mandates rolled out to these schools and then they end up facing budget shortfalls because of the mandates, then it creates a new problem for the communities. And what you're gonna see is local levies being raised because the one-time monies were given out, but with the mandates that were installed, they have to raise local levies just to keep teachers in place and valuable programs that they actually want. And so when that funding is given out to schools from the state level that we'll continue to pass, we need to make sure we're not sending that along with mandates.
Thank you. Lori, any additions or rebuttals?
I would just say that we definitely need to ensure that public taxpayer dollars go to public schools, that they don't go to private schools, that they don't go to home schools, that they go to public schools, because that is the mandate to make sure that all of our children get the education that they need. And we have to make sure that that happens.
Thank you. Cal, rebuttal?
I would say another way we could improve funding is the transportation cross subsidy increasing. We are at a per pupil rate instead of a per mile rate for busing, to the point where schools in the metro can actually make money on transportation, and we're suffering up here in the rural areas. So that's definitely something that could be improved.
Thank you. Well, my colleague Pastor Dan arrived, and I know he would want me to ask this question because he always says you have to ask one softball question. Dan, where are you?
Just one.
Hi. Cal, this one to you first. What one aspect of your opponent do you most admire?
I admire that Lori is a lifelong learner. Recently, we're at a township association meeting, something that I pretty regularly attend as a township officer. And Lori was talking about, during her speech, I gave one as well, she was talking about how she went back to school at 40 and got a college degree. And that's really impressive to me, and it also bears some similarity to my own life. I started work in the mines young, and in my 20s, I went back to school for maintenance. And upon doing that, that has paid off the whole rest of my life up until now. So I'm just very impressed with Lori being a lifetime learner.
Thank you.
Lori, same question. What one aspect of your opponent do you most admire?
Well, I think it's difficult, to put yourself forward and run for public office. And so it takes some bravery, and I know Cal is a township supervisor, so has done that and is running now. And so I admire his courage. Also, I'm guessing you have a lot of patience as well. I had one child and I have 2 grandchildren, and I can't imagine having a family as large as yours. And so congratulations. And I think they were homeschooled as well, and so that must take a lot of effort and time. And so congratulations on that kind of commitment.
Hey, Cal, and no gray hair. That's amazing.
No gray hair, just missing hair.
Any rebuttals or additions you'd like to make?
Oh, the addition that I'll make is that, I try to be patient, but I have my wonderful wife, Maria, who was in the audience. Oh, there she is. She's standing in the back. She has facilitated this. She has made this possible. Yes, my kids are, in fact, homeschooled. We have 9 wonderful children and 3 beautiful grandchildren, 2 of which were just born in the month of June this year. So we've got close cousins. It's a very exciting time for us as grandparents. People look at me often during the campaign and say, "You don't look old enough to be a grandpa." I mean, that's great, but we got started young, and we've got those grandkids. We love them. I'm a homeschool graduate myself, and I'm proud of that.
Thank you. Lori, additions? Rebuttal?
No additions other than, thank you. And I'm pleased we have that kind of in common, that lifelong learning thing. I guess I would add that I did get my master's degree when I was 60 years old from the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. And so, it is important to me to make sure that, I'm as community involved as I have always been. And so I want to continue that practice.
Thank you. Question? One more before we close, and this one to Lori first. If elected, how would you work to obtain, this is 14. If elected, how would you work to obtain more state funding for area economic development projects?
Yep. I would work to protect the 21st Century Fund from raids from Republicans and others who have previously tried to use our money to balance the budget, and so I don't think we can allow that to happen. Secondly, I was career force director for the state of Minnesota for the Department of Employment and Economic Development, And I did see a lot more connection that could have been happening here with DEED as well as the IRRR. They're both economic development agencies. They work together somewhat, but they could work together better than they do. And we could, we could access funding and we could have more interagency agreement. Also, as a legislator, I think sometimes legislators infrequently know what's already happening in the agencies that they oversee. And there are many efficiencies that we could really look at and find if legislators understood that maybe a little bit better, so that they don't pass laws that either are doing some things that are already being done or not building on those things that are being done. I saw that happen a few times, and with my experience, I think that I could make sure that it doesn't happen, at least under my watch.
Thank you. Cal, same question. If elected, how would you work to obtain more state funding for area economic development projects?
Yeah, I think that we can continue to utilize the IRRR. And like I said, the IRRR is a great resource. It takes in millions of dollars, and it roots out projects, and it decides kind of who's going to be the winners in those projects. The board there is now fully become an advisory board, and they no longer have full control over that. The commissioner of the IRRR has control over that agency. And for us to continue that kind of economic expansion that happens through the medium of the IRRR, you need mining tax dollars. And you're not going to get mining tax dollars without new mining. I'm very, very concerned about energy policy, as I've stated many times before. As we continue to make energy less reliable and less affordable, industries are not going to be interested in locating here. And mining, which uses about 30% of all energy sold in the state of Minnesota, iron ore processing, I can see it being very difficult for myself and my brothers and sisters in our locals being able to negotiate good contracts when our companies are spending most of their money on their electric bill. And so if we want to sustain and expand mining and be able to sustain economic development from the stronghold of the Iron Range and using those monies that Lori was talking about in those funds and keeping them here, we need to sustain and expand mining.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I'm not going to have a rebuttal for this question, but I'm going to have a closing. And if you'd like to include anything from the rebuttal you would have given in your closing, feel free to do so. Cal, Lori opened up, so we're going to give you the first opportunity for your closing remarks.
Okay. Well, this has been a nice opportunity to be able to get in front of some people. Obviously, this will be available on video. And I just want to thank all the players here, again, Hibbing Public Access and yourself and Pastor Dan, who finally made it here. I'm so pleased. Looking forward to meeting him afterwards. But I'm Cal Warwis, and I'm running for House 7B. I want us to help sustain and expand mining operations in northeastern Minnesota, which I like to call the miningest district in the state. We have, downstream of the American steel industry, which starts right here, we have 11 million jobs that are depending on the kind of work we do. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. And so sustaining what we have and expanding that out for the next generation of Rangers to make them successful is very, very important to me. Energy policy is important, and we need to lean into that so that we can continue to afford to live on the Iron Range. And with our expanding group of seniors, we have people in their late 60s that are on a fixed income. Those folks are depending on us to make good choices on energy policy, and we need to continue to work towards a balanced energy policy so that people can afford to stay in their own homes and actually have a little bit of money left over to do the things they like to do, not just have to do. I'm proud to be endorsed by the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association, and keeping our streets safe and supporting our Second Amendment rights are very, very close to my heart. And as your next legislator, that's what I'm going to do.
Thank you. Lori, your closing?
Sure. Thank you. I want to thank everybody for being here. Thank the audience who will be listening in. I'm very proud to be running for District 7B in the State House. I have over 30 endorsements, including 21 union endorsements. And so although I might not have a union card, I have the faith and support of union families that I will be the best representative for them. And so that's exciting to me. And also I'd like to leave you with 3 takeaways. I want to leave you with my experience. I have done a lot in my life, from working with St. Louis County Commissioner Liz Prebich and learning about how government can help people, to working as the planning director for Arrowhead Economic Opportunity Agency, AEOA, designing, funding, implementing programs to help those who are most vulnerable among us, whether that be housing or workforce or transportation or programs to house homeless people. I also want to talk to you a little bit about temperament. We talked about crossing the aisle and talking with people who are different, who may have different views than us. I believe in doing that. In fact, I searched that out because it helps me with my own ideas and thoughts, and we can work together. And so my temperament is that. I don't believe in fear-mongering. I believe in science. I believe that we need to transition to a clean energy economy, and that that climate change is very real. And with regard to policies, I will be all about supporting policies that benefit our district, including copper nickel mining. We agree that that needs to be done. And I will be a champion for that, and try to move the needle forward on that. And finally, this campaign has been so rewarding to me. In going to hundreds and hundreds of houses, I have been able to hear people's stories and challenges and dreams, and those voices will stay with me as I represent us and the Iron Range in St. Paul. And so I just want to thank them and all of you for this opportunity. Thank you.
I'd like to thank our candidates, the viewing audience, both those here and those on HPAT. Ron Werkle with HPAT always does a fantastic job with all of our forums. We need to thank him. And Shelley Hansen, I don't know what we'd do without her. She is a wonderful supporter for all of us on the Governmental Affairs Committee. Good luck in your campaign, and we'll sign off for the evening.